There are moments in world history when everything changes in a single night. This might be one of them, because just hours ago, alarms started screaming across the Persian Gulf. Not one country, not two, almost the entire region. Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, sirens, explosions, fighter jets scrambling into the sky, and then the reports started coming in. Iran had launched missiles. Not symbolic ones, not warning shots. Real ballistic missiles. And they weren't aimed at empty desert. They were aimed at American military bases.
New satellite imagery has revealed visible damage at Kuwait's Ali Al-Salam Air Base following an Iranian missile strike, marking a significant escalation in the conflict. Fresh Chinese satellite captures show at least 4 confirmed impact points inside the perimeter of the US installation.
More details are coming in from Bahrain, where Iran targeted a US naval base. New videos show a thick smoke seen rising above the Bahrainian capital Manama amid reports of further Iranian strikes targeting the country's large naval base.
Because Iran didn't hit just one location. They hit four US military installations across the Gulf, almost simultaneously. And one of them is not just any base. It's the headquarters of the US Navy's 5th Fleet, the nerve center of American naval power in the Middle East. If that sounds serious, that's because it is. People in Bahrain say the first thing they heard was a deep roar overhead, then another. And suddenly, the sky lit up, Patriot defense systems firing, interceptors chasing incoming missiles, explosions over the water, shockwaves rattling buildings, smoke rising near the naval base in Manama. Residents grabbed their phones, videos flooded social media, people shouting, car alarms going off, sirens everywhere. This wasn't speculation anymore. The missiles were real, and according to Iranian sources, this was no accident, no random retaliation. This was an organized strike. Multiple targets, multiple countries, launched within minutes of each other. A message, a very loud one. Let's slow down for a second, because the choice of targets tells us a lot. Iran claims it struck 4 major American facilities. Al-Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Al-Salam Air Base in Kuwait, Al-Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, and the headquarters of the US 5th Fleet in Bahrain. Now, if you're not familiar with military strategy, that list might just sound like geography. But to Pentagon planners, that list is chilling, because those bases are not random outposts. They are the backbone of US military operations across the Middle East. Al-Udeid in Qatar, that's the largest American base in the region. It's where US Central Command runs air operations, bombers, surveillance, logistics, everything. Al-Dhafra in the UAE, that's where advanced aircraft operate, including intelligence missions and long-range strike platforms. Al-Salam in Kuwait, a critical logistics hub. And then there's Bahrain, the 5th Fleet, 8,000 American sailors stationed there, ships coming and going, command rooms filled with radar screens and satellite feeds, coordination with dozens of allied navies. 47 countries working together to patrol some of the most important shipping lanes on Earth. And that is what Iran targeted. Bahrain is not just a base, it's a command center. The 5th Fleet oversees operations across the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, parts of the Indian Ocean, oil routes, trade routes, military patrols, counter-smuggling missions, counter-terrorism operations. If something happens in those waters, chances are the order comes from Bahrain. So, when missiles strike near that headquarters, military strategists start asking very uncomfortable questions. Was this symbolic? Or was it meant to disrupt command and control? Because if communication nodes go down, even briefly, operations across the region could slow. Ships lose coordination, aircraft lose guidance, and that's exactly the kind of chaos adversaries hope to create. Now here's the part people sometimes forget. These bases are not just soldiers. They are communities. Families live there, spouses, children, schools, housing compounds. In Bahrain, one of those neighborhoods sits right near the naval installation. When the missiles hit, authorities made a decision quickly: evacuate. The neighborhood of Jafar, home to many US Navy families, suddenly became a crisis zone. Cars packed, people rushing to leave, officials trying to maintain order while defense systems kept firing overhead. Only hours earlier, the United States and Israel had launched strikes on Iranian targets. The assumption among many officials? Iran would respond, but maybe in a limited way. Something symbolic, something controlled. That assumption may already be collapsing, because launching missiles at 4 bases across multiple countries is not symbolic. That's coordination, planning, preparation, and it suggests Iran was ready for this moment. Iran gave the operation a name: True Promise 4. That number matters, because it signals continuity. This isn't being framed as a one-off retaliation. It's part of an ongoing campaign, and Iranian officials have made that very clear. Their message: the strikes will continue, relentlessly, until their enemies are defeated. Now, statements like that are often political theater. Governments say dramatic things during crises, but still, words matter, especially when missiles are already flying. In Qatar, residents described something surreal. Not one explosion, dozens, but many of them weren't impacts. They were interceptions. A person was killed in Abu Dhabi, not by a direct hit, by debris, fragments falling from missiles intercepted in the air. That's the hidden danger of missile defense. Even when it works, gravity still exists, pieces still fall, and sometimes those pieces land where people live. As news spread, governments across the Gulf began taking emergency steps: airspace closures, flight cancellations, shelter alerts, embassies telling citizens to stay inside. Think about that. American diplomatic missions across several countries all issuing the same message: shelter in place, stay alert, prepare for more attacks. This isn't normal diplomatic language. This is crisis language. If the missile launches weren't enough, Iranian officials added something else. They said all US bases and interests in the region are now legitimate targets. Every base, every installation, every outpost, from Iraq to Syria to Jordan to Saudi Arabia. That statement changes the strategic picture dramatically, because suddenly thousands of American troops across the region are on high alert, waiting, watching, wondering if they're next. Iran rarely acts alone. It has networks, allies, militias, groups that can strike without officially being part of Iran's military. Already, reports suggest activity in Iraq, drone attacks, militia movements, threats. If those groups fully enter the conflict, the battlefield expands overnight. And that is exactly what US planners have tried to prevent for years. Some commentators are already making dramatic comparisons. Pearl Harbor. Now, let's be careful here. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but the reason that comparison is being mentioned is simple: the scale. Multiple American military facilities targeted across a region at once. That kind of coordination is rare, very rare. And it signals something deeper than a symbolic exchange. It signals a confrontation. So where does this go next? That's the question every government is asking tonight. If Iran continues firing, the United States will respond. If the United States responds, Iran will likely escalate further. And if regional countries begin choosing sides, what started as strikes and retaliation could expand into something far larger. A regional war, maybe worse. Right now, the situation is fluid. Reports are still coming in. Damage assessments are ongoing. Casualty numbers remain unclear. But one thing is certain: a line has been crossed. Missiles have already been fired. Bases have already been hit. Families have already been evacuated. And the world is now watching to see what happens next. Because once events reach this point, they rarely calm down quickly. Sometimes they do. Diplomacy, back channels, quiet negotiations, but sometimes they spiral. And if that happens here, the consequences could reach far beyond the Middle East. At first, officials in Washington hoped the strikes might stop. One wave, a message sent, a line drawn. But the reports coming in from the Gulf told a different story. This was not one wave, it was multiple. Missiles, then more missiles, drones mixed in, different directions. Different targets, and that detail matters, because firing several rounds instead of just one is not about symbolism. It's about overwhelming defenses. Missile defense systems are powerful, but they have limits. Each interceptor costs millions. Each launch takes time, and when dozens of incoming objects appear on radar screens at once, the math becomes uncomfortable very quickly. This is the strategy Iran appears to have used. Saturation, pressure, confusion. And for a few tense minutes in command centers across the Gulf, it worked. Missiles don't care about diplomatic agreements, and suddenly governments in the Gulf are facing a nightmare scenario. They are not officially at war with Iran, yet missiles are landing in their territory. That creates pressure, political pressure, security pressure, public fear. Airspace closures began appearing almost immediately. Flights canceled, routes rerouted, airliners circling, waiting for instructions. This may sound routine, but it's actually a very serious move. Airspace closures mean officials expect continued danger. Missiles, drones, military aircraft, commercial planes cannot share skies with those threats. So, airports across the region began shutting down operations. Dubai, Doha, other major hubs. For travelers, it meant delays. For governments, it meant something much bigger: preparation. Now let's return to Bahrain for a moment, because the 5th Fleet headquarters is central to this entire story. This base has been the command center of U.S. naval operations in the region for decades. Ships in the Gulf, carrier groups, patrol vessels, minesweepers, surveillance operations, all coordinated there. So, when missiles strike near or inside that facility, military planners immediately begin assessing damage. Communication systems, radar networks, command infrastructure, even temporary disruption can matter. Because naval forces rely heavily on coordination, ships hundreds of miles apart need guidance, orders, information, and when missiles hit that headquarters, even if the damage is limited, the psychological impact is enormous. It sends a message to every sailor in the fleet: you are within reach. War is not just about explosions, it's about perception. Iran understands that. By hitting multiple bases at once, Tehran created shock. News headlines around the world immediately changed. Investors began watching markets nervously. Governments scheduled emergency meetings. People asked the same question everywhere: is this the start of a larger war? Sometimes that psychological effect is as important as the physical damage, because uncertainty can reshape decision-making. Leaders become cautious or aggressive. And in moments like this, small choices matter. Iranian officials didn't hide their intention. Their statements were blunt. All U.S. bases in the region are now potential targets. That is not subtle diplomacy. That is strategic signaling. What Tehran is essentially saying is this: if we are attacked, we can respond across the entire region. That complicates the U.S. position dramatically, because American troops are spread across many countries: Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE. Each of those locations suddenly becomes a potential flashpoint, and defending all of them simultaneously is not easy, even for the United States military. There is another concern keeping defense planners awake tonight: Iran's network of allied groups. Over the past 2 decades, Tehran has built relationships with militias and organizations across the Middle East. Some are political, some are military, some operate somewhere in between. Groups in Iraq, groups in Syria, groups in Lebanon. If those forces become involved, the conflict stops being a direct US-Iran exchange. It becomes something else entirely, a multi-front confrontation. And historically, those are much harder to control, because proxies don't always follow strict rules. They act independently, sometimes unpredictably, and that makes escalation far more dangerous. Reports coming from Iraq are already raising alarms. Drone activity, militia mobilization, strikes near locations used by American personnel. Nothing massive yet, but enough to raise eyebrows, because Iraq is a complicated environment: multiple armed groups, multiple political factions, foreign forces present. If attacks increase there, US commanders could suddenly face threats from directions they weren't expecting. And when that happens, conflicts tend to expand. When historians look back at nights like this, they often ask one question: was this the beginning of something larger, or the moment when disaster was narrowly avoided? Right now, we simply don't know. What we do know is that missiles were fired. American bases were targeted. Regional governments were forced into emergency mode, and the entire world suddenly started paying attention. Moments like this don't happen often, but when they do, they remind everyone how fragile global stability can be. Leaders are calculating, militaries are preparing, diplomats are working quietly behind closed doors, and millions of people are watching the news, trying to understand where this story goes next. Because the decisions made in the coming hours and days could shape the future of the region for years, maybe longer. History is full of moments that seemed small at first, but later turned out to be turning points. One strike leads to another. One decision triggers another. and suddenly the world finds itself holding its breath. The hope now is that cooler heads prevail, that diplomacy finds space to work, that leaders step back from the edge before events move too far. Because once conflicts reach a certain point, stopping them becomes far more difficult. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think this situation will calm down? Or are we looking at the beginning of a much bigger conflict? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Support the channel by liking the video, and subscribe so you stay updated as this story continues to unfold. Because one thing is certain, this situation is far from over.